Sonus Faber's Sonetto Generation 2 was introduced at Munich High End in May of 2024, and they've really upped their game versus the previous Sonetto series, with a series that they call Poetry for the Eyes and Ears. Why? Because they've done a lot of improvements to the sonics of the product, but they've also really improved the design. I'm Joe with Gramophone. Let's dig in. Now, Sonetto Generation 2 is the first series from Sonus Faber to incorporate what they've learned in developing the awesome Suprema system. That's a $750,000 system consisting of two big speakers, twin subwoofers, a separate amplifier and a separate crossover network, and a representative comes to your home to custom tailor it to your environment. Now, we were lucky enough to actually audition the Suprema system up in New York City at their House of Sound with Ricky, who showed us and played for us that amazing product. Now, sometimes people ask, why does a company like Sonus Faber develop a $750,000 speaker system? Who's going to buy that? Well, they do it only partly because they hope to sell some. They're also challenging the design and engineering teams, because with a cost-no-object product, those folks can learn things that can then trickle down and become applied to much more affordable series like the Sonetto Generation 2. First, let's review the speakers in the Sonetto Generation 2 series. The Sonetto 8 Generation 2 is the flagship floor stander at $79.99 a pair. Sonetto 5 G2 floor stander is at $64.99 a pair. Sonetto 3 G2 is the most compact of the floor standers. That's $44.99 for the pair. Sonetto 2 Generation 2 bookshelf is at $27.49 for the pair. And Sonetto 1 G2, the 5¼ bookshelf, is at $19.99 a pair. Now there's two more speakers that can round out your home theater. The Sonetto Center G2 is $24.99 each, and Sonetto On-Wall G2 is $14.99 the pair. Let's talk design for a moment. We think Sonus Faber did a great job with the industrial design of this product. The designers managed to do these very simple, elegant lines, and as you run your hand all across the speaker, even in the back, you realize there are no flat surfaces. It's all gently curved in radius, which also, of course, has sonic benefits, doesn't just only make it look cool. And then they've married this wonderful design that they came up with to what they call a research-based approach to sonic excellence. Let's talk about this concrete base, which is really pretty clever. You see it both at the bottom of Model 5 and here at the bookshelf speaker as well, Model 2. This concrete is not 100% concrete. They've mixed in some natural wood fibers and so forth, which makes it very non-resonant. But it also gives a nice, rigid platform for the speaker to be sitting on. So, number one, this is much less likely to tip, right? Because it's got such a solid base. Number two, there's a sonic benefit to it. There's a port at the bottom of both of these speakers. And now you're going to get a uniform bass response, really no matter whether you're putting the speaker on a carpeted floor, on a wood floor, linoleum, doesn't matter, because now you've got a platform at the bottom that gives consistent airflow from the port. Very clever. In Sonetto 1 and 2, the bookshelf models, they've added what they called Intono technology. So basically, they changed the bracing versus what they originally had done, and they added a Helmholtz resonator to the port. And the sonic result of that is you get very consistent bass performance out of Model 1 and Model 2, but you don't get any chuffing noises coming from the port. Obviously, that can detract from the music. If you're enjoying this video, please like and subscribe. That helps us out a lot. And click that little bell icon so you're always notified of our upcoming content. Let's talk about the first of the technologies that come directly from the Suprema series into Sonetto Generation 2, and that's the Cork isolation chamber for the mid-range driver. You get an incredibly open and clear and natural mid-range presentation from this speaker. And in the 5 and the 8 towers, it's partly because of that Cork isolation chamber. So cork is a naturally absorbent material. That's good. So sound is not so much reflecting back and then reflecting forward, it's being absorbed. But they've also molded it in a way that it breaks up any standing waves. Very good engineering. The second of the technologies that come directly from Suprema is what they call the Camelia-shaped mid-range driver. You find this in Sonetto 5, 8, and in Sonetto Center. Camelia shape, camellia being a flower which has 5 petals, and you can actually see that this is not a simply round or circular type mid-range cone. It has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 5-sided product, right? The reason that they did this is because they realized that when you're pumping a lot of energy through a mid-range driver, you want the motion to be as linear as possible, and this actually functions in a more linear fashion than you would with a circular driver. Less distortion, more clear and open mid-range notes. The mid-range has an organic basket in a calculated shape. It's asymmetrical with no repetition in its pattern. So it's stronger to support the driver better, yet it's also lighter than before. And you get less resonance plus an improved airflow to keep the driver cool. So let's talk about 2 more technologies that contribute to this really open, impressive sounding mid-range. One is this aluminum phase plug that helps the driver to move back and forth in a linear fashion, again reducing distortion. And the second is the surround here. You can see that it's actually an inverted surround, concave, not convex, like most surrounds are, because Sonus faber's engineers found that this helps the driver move back and forth, again, with a more linear motion for lower distortion. So let's talk about the sonic benefits to you when you're listening to music of all these improvements that Sonus faber has done in the mid-range in the entire series. The mid-range now just sounds so much more open, and the sound stage, that kind of impression that you get that you're actually listening to the band, is really impressive. When we listened with classical music, it was immediately apparent how much better each of the new models is compared to the older ones in the mids. When you listen to something like Wayne Shorter's saxophone in Weather Report's Birdland, it was just so much more present to us, you know. It was so much clearer and more easy to hear. When we listen to the vocals in Toto's song Africa, one that I really love, those harmonies are really beautifully layered, and they have great singers in Toto. And it just came through so much more impressively on the new ones versus the older series. So let's talk about Sonetto 5's significantly improved bass response. We have new bass drivers here, completely new cone construction, but you also see that in the surround, they've replicated this Camelia shape lesson that they learned up here. So the surround itself actually has the Camelia shape with the 5-sided surround, keeping the driver under control better, minimizing distortion. So let's talk a little bit about the crossover networks in the new G2 series. The crossover, of course, is to some extent the traffic director, keeping high frequencies going to the tweeter, mid-range frequencies here, and deep bass frequencies here. But that has to do with frequency response. This time around, Sonus faber's engineers have paid a lot more attention to phase coherence, so that the output of tweeter, mid-range, and bass drivers are arriving at your ears more coherently, more at the same time than what they've done previously. So they learned a lot from the Homage series, Stradivari for example, as well as the Suprema series, in order to be able to get the crossover network to be much more coherent in terms of its phase response. And again, the benefits are obvious when you listen to the wide open sound staging that you get from these new products. Now, Sonus faber is also using all new tweeters in the G2 series. You'll be really impressed by the high end. This is, of course, a silk dome tweeter, but it's a new construction. It's also a DAD, or damped apex dome tweeter, which we've seen before from them. Damped apex dome, meaning we've got this little billet right where the apex of the dome, the peak of the dome, the point where distortions would become most obvious. They've simply got that just a little bit blocked off here. They also added a copper shorting ring behind, which you can't see at this point. The result is you get this really smooth, extended high end from the G2 series versus what they've done previously. To sum it all up, Sonus faber's Sonetto Generation 2 has really raised their profile in that roughly $1,000 to $8,000 range in terms of speakers. They've completely rethought this series. We've got new cabinet shapes, new crossover networks, new tweeter, new mid-range and woofer drivers. The phase coherent crossover ties it all together. You will be really impressed by what you're hearing in this new series, and we love to play them for you. So if you can, visit us at Gramophone in Timonium, Columbia, and Gaithersburg, Maryland. If you come to the Timonium store, you've got to stop and see our awesome Experience Center, so we can actually play for you what we're hearing when we listen to music on this awesome new series of speakers. Thank you for watching this video. We look forward to seeing you soon.